And good day, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be around the world. And welcome to this special stream, which was designed for a young chap called King Baby Bob, who absolutely told me he was going to be here for this stream, but isn't. So there we go. It's just looking at the British Army, really. 1939 in 40 in France, and the British and Canadian Army, 1944, 1945 in Northwest Europe. My grandfather went across on T+3, so I even have a little bit of modern stuff about that. However, before we start, and to give King Baby Bob, who has been moaning to me about doing a stream for him for I don't know how long, a little bit more chance to join the stream. Let's do. I think.
Farewell and adieu to you Spanish ladies, farewell and adieu to you ladies of Spain, for we've received orders to sail for old England. We hope in a short time to see yous again. We'll rant and we'll roar like true British sailors, we'll rant and we'll roar all on the salt seas, until we strike soundings in the channel of old England. From Ushant to Scilly 'tis 35 leagues. We hove our ship to with a wind from southwest, boys. We hove our ship to for to strike soundings clear. It's 45 fathoms with a white sandy bottom. We squared our main yard and up channel did steer. We'll rant and we'll roar like true British sailors. We'll rant and we'll roar all on the salt seas, until we strike soundings in the channel of old England. From Ushant to Scilly 'tis 35 leagues. Now the first land we sighted, it is called the Dudman. Next Ramshead off Plymouth, start Portland and White. We sailed on by Beachy, by Fairley and Dungeness, and we hove our ship to off the South Foreland Light. We'll rant and we'll roar like true British sailors. We'll rant and we'll roar all on the salt seas, until we strike soundings in the channel of old England. From Ushant to Scilly 'tis 35 leagues. Then the signal was given for the Grand Fleet to anchor, and all in the Downs that night for to lie. Let go your shank painter, likewise your cat stopper, haul up your clew garnets, let tacks and sheets fly. We'll rant and we'll roar like true British sailors. We'll rant and we'll roar all on the salt seas, until we strike soundings in the channel of old England. From Ushant to Scilly 'tis 35 leagues. Now let every man drink off his full bumper, and let every man toss off his full glass. We'll sing and be jolly and drown melancholy, and here's to the health of each true-hearted lass. We'll rant and we'll roar like true British sailors. We'll rant and we'll roar all on the salt seas, until we strike soundings in the channel of old England. From Ushant to Scilly 'tis 35 leagues.
So there you go. That was Spanish Ladies. Hang on. Friend of the channel is about to join. Hopefully. George, how you going, mate?
I don't have an opinion on that.
You don't
No.
have an opinion on how you're going. I bet you do.
Uh, I'm doing not too bad. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm alright, man.
Yeah, I sort of.
I've been vastly depressed over the last few weeks, but I am a bit better today.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. For purely apolitical reasons, I assume.
Yeah. Something like
Oh,
that.
thank goodness.
No, listen, this stream is supposedly about the British Army, 1939-1940
Mhm.
to 1944-1945, including the Canadians, and it is entirely done for a bloke in our Discord who absolutely promised me he would be here and isn't.
Well, I did see that, so I have decided to sort of ingratiate myself with your presence, given the fortuitous circumstances. So here we are. What do you have to tell us, Duke?
Well, okay, the British Army, 1939 to 1940. Let's do that first.
Yeah, sure.
Great soldiers. Very, very, very professional, good blokes. Fought all over the empire. Very often in World War One. The Germans called them guys who would like go to ground immediately because the British Army dug themselves in. Because if you're a sensible infantry soldier, that's what you do.
Sure.
Because
Should we put this into context for the audience? So,
Go
as
on.
I understand it, you shoot me down here. In 1939, when Hitler declared war, the British Army sent across, as it did in 1914, the British Expeditionary Force, which
Yes.
was almost entirely composed of regulars, into northern France to basically
But
back up.
much smaller in 1939 than it was in 1940. Like
Mhm.
a quarter of the size.
Okay, so is that what 100,000 men then, something like that?
Less, even less.
Mm-hmm. And the basic principle behind that is that they are sort of firemen to sort of plug any gaps in the line and help the French in a general backup against Germany.
The British Army in 39-40 was the only army in the world that had no more horses. The British Army was totally mechanized.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely it was. The only British cavalry division in 1939 was in Palestine, where it did patrols and stuff like that.
Okay.
And you know what? In some ways that's sad because soldiers and horses had always had this great link between them. But on the other hand, one of the best things about modern war is that horses don't get killed anymore. And I know you're a chap who's done some writing and will get that.
Yeah.
Because like horses are quite gentle animals for the most part.
Yeah, it expects a lot of them, and motorcycle just went past my window. But no, it's quite. I mean, I can't be entirely sure of this, but knowing the horses that I've known, if you were to ride them into artillery, like those big guns and all that sort of thing, they wouldn't really accept it. Bless them, it's just not.
They got trained. They got trained to do that. There were horses who saved their riders by like kicking infantry dudes who were trying to kill them, and that happened quite often. But the horses are basically gentle animals. The stallions fight each other, but generally speaking, they're quite peaceable. So yeah, I love horses and I love dogs, and it makes me sad that horses or dogs are in human wars because they're much nicer than that, really.
Yeah. Just to maybe you want to answer Mitch here, who's just asking what campaigns are covered here. Find the Norwegian and Burman fronts don't get attention they deserve, in my opinion, especially when Japanese army suffered largest defeat at Imphal, or was it Kohima? I'm just gonna quickly say, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. There's quite there. I mean, there is a lot of people who went to war in Burma against the Japanese,
There were.
and my father's headmaster was actually an example of one of them who got taken as a prisoner of war, and those stories are almost biblical in how grotesque they
But
are.
to
But
be
they don't
fair,
cover
Bill,
here.
but to be fair, Bill Slim in 44, 45 and the 14th Army in Burma
Mm.
inflicted on the Japanese the largest defeat the Imperial Japanese Army ever had on land.
Mm. Yeah, well, I think that was
The British 14th Army destroyed the Imperial Japanese Army in Burma in 44, 45 under Field Marshal Bill Slim. So don't forget that either.
yeah. Well, I think Mitch was bringing that up, and he asked, "Was that Imphal or Kohima?"
Well, Kohima was like a very small number. It was the Royal East Kents and a small number of like support troops who were surrounded by 25 times more Japanese and beat them off. Imphal was more a big Japanese offensive that came totally unstuck. But they were related. But Kohima was almost the best thing the British Army did in World War II. It was like one battalion, the Royal West Kent Regiment, beat off an entire Japanese regiment, which is like a British regiment is a battalion basically, and it's only a regiment in a kind of general sense, whereas in Japan and most other armies, a regiment is 3 battalions. And at Imphal, the Royal West Kents beat off like most of the Japanese division, for fuck's sake, on their own.
Yeah,
it was one of the greatest British battles there's ever been. Like if you look at things like Rorke's Drift and various other British battles in history, Imphal is way up there with them. And if you go to my Discord after this stream, I'll put up a link to a documentary on the Battle of Imphal, which was incredible because there were British soldiers on one side of the local British residents' tennis court and Japanese soldiers on the other, and they were trying to take it. And the Brits, who were vastly outnumbered, never gave up. They just kept fighting. It was Imphal was probably one of the greatest British battles of World War II. It's not what we're talking about here, by the way, because we're talking about the British Army in Europe and in 1944 the Canadian Army as well. But yeah, if you want to talk about great British battles, Imphal, the Royal West Kents, 1 battalion against the fucking Japanese division, who they beat. That's it. That's one of the best things the British Army did in World War II, because they had an exceptionally good colonel. It was a good regiment. They had a great colonel. They had a certain number of allies, including Gurkhas and Sikhs and what have you, but not that many. And that's why they won. They were just damn good soldiers. And also by that stage, the British Army had worked out surrendering to the Japanese was like a death sentence, basically.
Yeah. So, okay. So should we? Sorry, but for that quick detour. I think that was just to address what Mitch was saying. But so you wanted to talk about the British Army between 1939, 1940, and then, of course, 1944 to 45. Just quick question about that. Why is North Africa and Italy? It sounds like they're sort of being excluded from this. Is there a reason?
Well, you would have to ask my young friend who wanted this stream for that.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of understand it, but like because they were different campaigns. But I'm not King Baby Bob, so I don't really know.
Okay.
And I told him if he didn't come on this stream, like I would kick him from the Discord, and I probably will. But
yeah, I think we could keep that a personal matter between you two. Because
this is why I'm doing this stream. He's asked me for week upon week, can I come on a Splendid Isolation stream? And I'm like, because he's 16, no, he can't. Because that would make me a hypocrite, because I don't think 16-year-olds should be allowed on political streams.
No,
but I did. No, I don't think so either. But like I have said to him, look, mate, you seem a good bloke. I'll do a historical stream. You can come on that. And this is that historical stream, and he hasn't turned up. So
yeah,
Well,
let's try and fill in the dead air then.
All right. So, all right, 3940, British Army sent to France was pretty well trained for the most part. It was the only army in the world that was totally mechanized, but there was hardly any of it. Like, I'm not sure, what was it? Britain sent originally 2 divisions, something like that. When Germany had 150 or whatever it was, and even France had 90. We sent 2 divisions, so that was pathetic.
Wait, as I recall, in 1939, France had alone against the German border something like 60 divisions.
Yeah.
So, 2 is. I mean, it's not really gonna cut the mustard, is it?
No, it's not. They were good divisions. They were relatively well trained. But what Britain then did was they started sending territorial divisions over there, who were much less well trained. So by the time of the actual German offensive against France, which would never have happened had we not declared war over Poland, Hitler was never going to attack France and Belgium. That was not his intention. Read everything he ever said. Watch everything he ever said. Why was he ever going to attack France and Belgium?
Well, from an ideological perspective, he wasn't. But now that the war had happened, as I recall, he was, as I recall it, basically he conquered Poland and said, "Oh, I want to take out the Western Allies as quickly as possible." As basically, his general
he didn't.
Well, hold on. So, if I recount the anecdote, because this comes from Anthony Beaver, when I read his book,
I know that chap. Yeah,
a while ago, he basically recounted a story in which Hitler takes out Poland very quickly. He's very pleased with himself. Thinks his dick is as big as the earth, and basically says to his general staff, I think particularly Brauchwitz, I want to conquer the Western Allies before 1939 closes. And Brauchwitz basically says, yeah, go have a laugh. Because
a bit difficult given Poland started in September 1939.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, go have a laugh. You're not going to do an offensive in in the freaking winter. And basically Hitler had a tantrum and said, well, okay, then I guess. But that's, as far as I'm aware, that's how Hitler perceived the sort of Western Allies. It was sort of like they're a geopolitical adversary. They're not an ideological adversary, so to speak.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, look, Britain declared war because Hitler said he was going to invade Poland. I think Britain giving the big red war button to Poland, which, by the way, was a military dictatorship in 1939, was the most insane thing any country's ever done. But Britain did do that. And the only reason France also guaranteed Poland was because Britain did. France wouldn't have done it on their own. And we had no realistic way of helping Poland whatsoever. It was insane. It was totally insane. It was kind of like, Britain at the moment has guaranteed Sweden and Finland. Britain can't defend either Sweden or Finland on their fucking own, let alone together. Look, Britain has so few warships that even during this great jubilee for Queen Elizabeth II, the Royal Navy has so few warships it cannot even organize a traditional naval review. It doesn't have enough ships. It just doesn't have enough warships because Alexander Johnson, while he's willing to give Ukraine God knows how much weapons and money from British taxpayers, isn't prepared to make the Royal Navy a bit stronger at all.
I have no opinion on that.
I fucking will do, but yeah. But yeah, honestly, I mean, that's the truth. We have to talk the truth about these things, and Britain could not help Poland in the least degree in 1939. Now, I have become convinced after many years and a lot of reading that Hitler had no interest in attacking Britain and had very little interest in attacking Belgium and France. And the only reason he did so is we decided if he attacked Poland, we were going to attack him. Now, I'm not saying Hitler was a good guy. I think Hitler was an arsehole. But he was no bigger arsehole than Stalin.
I mean, here's the thing. I would say that ideologically Hitler had no, he had no intention to attack us. But the second order consequences of his ideology meant that he would have ended up in scraps with us because it was in Britain's interest at the time to make sure that neither any power in Europe got too powerful.
See, I disagree with that totally, George. But go on, you carry.
I mean, it's purely historiographical. This is just coming from the politicians of the time. It was. I agree, and they were lying too. But okay. And in that sense, it is a sort of a second order. I'm quite big on second order consequences because I think Animan, that's a really interesting opinion. Unfortunately, I can't have my own opinion on that.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
I can't. What I would say is that it is a sort of second order consequence that Hitler is going to, if Hitler is going to try and absorb and subjugate large swaths of Europe, the British government of the time was going to oppose that. Now, you might think that's unnecessary. I can definitely see the argument of why, I wouldn't want Hitler to control most of the ports in Europe. I can just totally see that. It seems such a logical thing to me.
But he's going, sorry, I beg your pardon, not Adam, George. If he's going, and you're welcome on the stream, by the way. If you want to join, just tune me on the Discord. If Hitler is going east, that is not taking over any ports, really.
Well, it's taking Danzig.
Not the matter to anyone in the West. Anyway.
It's taking Danzig. It's taking Memel. It could be potentially taking Leningrad and Helsinki. I
They're
mean,
all
sure, these aren't the big.
they're Baltic Sea ports.
It's
It
not the
doesn't matter.
biggest, but that's still more ports you can build ships from, and it's also more ports which Britain does trade from. So
Limited in both respects, but yeah, all right.
yeah, sure, but
The biggest ships any of the Polish ports could build were destroyers. Like they couldn't even build cruisers. Didn't have the infrastructure to do it. So, and even the Russians in World War II, they struggled to build cruisers, never alone anything bigger than that.
Yeah, but think about it less in terms of the immediate thing and more in sort of, Germany has a big coastline. It has a much larger population.
No, Germany has a tiny coastline.
Well, no. If Germany had taken those areas, it would have had a bigger coastline. Okay,
but only in the Baltic.
Sure, but just entertain the argument.
Yeah.
They have a bigger coastline. They have a much larger population because, of course, they had plans, particularly under Albert Speer, to enslave.
Let's say that Germany had a population of 70 million, which would have been very big back then.
It had population of
Britain almost has a population of 70 million these days, but a lot of them are not Anglo-Celtic British. But let's just say Germany had 70 million people, right? And I'm no fan of Germany, by the way. I'm not a Hitler fan at all. Just to be clear for anyone in the audience. But the Royal Navy could outbuild the German Navy, even with all those extra ship yards, like 3 or 4 times over.
Okay, but you're not seeing this sort of in the immediate term, sure. But it's what I'm trying to consider is that, like, in the longer term, with a much larger population and controlling what, a third of at least of the GDP of Europe, you could definitely see that transformation. And
to Germany having absolutely crap navy to slightly better than crap navy, and the Royal Navy still being 5 times bigger.
What's your time scale though? Because
all right. Let's look at this because we haven't moved beyond 3940. The German Navy in 1939-40 had 7 light cruisers, about 25 destroyers.
Yeah, it's wank.
Wait. Let me finish.
Okay.
And two very small and not very powerful battleships with only 11-inch guns. At the same time, the Royal Navy had at least 15 battleships, which at smallest had 14-inch guns, rather than 11-inch guns, with another 5 or actually 6 at that time building. They had something like 78 cruisers and 200 plus destroyers. Now, explain to me how the German Navy was ever going to invade Britain with those forces.
No,
but you also have to bear in mind that during the German invasion of Norway, the Germans lost half their navy, sunk by the Royal Navy with a bit of help by the Norwegians. Even that shitty German Navy was like half the size it was by 1940.
Okay, but again, this is a matter of timescales. Okay, we're not necessarily talking about between 1940 and 1943 or anything like that. We're talking about Germany. Germany invades Poland. Let's say hypothetically, I think it's unlikely, but hypothetically they defeat Russia, and take the AA line. Suppose they've completed that by 1946. Then 10 years later, that's a reasonable amount of time to have surpassed a country which is, even in per capita terms, it's struggling relative to countries like the USA.
Do you know how quickly the British like shipbuilders could build ships in the
I'm sure-
1930s or 40s.
I'm sure it was very quick, Duke, but that's not the
Yeah.
important. That's not the important variable I'm considering, because this is like, you know, Britain's population in 1939 is something like 42 million people.
Yes.
Germany, in a hypothetical conquest of Eastern Europe, would have a population of about 120 million people. Now, suppose they're all shit. Okay, suppose
Yeah.
all their shit
Many-
builders are complete
Many
crap.
of them, many
Yeah,
of
okay.
them would have been. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Into the longer term, you know, Germany is known for building up efficiency in terms of, you know, their production. You have to remember
They were
that.
never very good at building ships, though. Even
Sure,
look at
sure,
the,
but you know,
even look at the Kaiser Marina in World War One, where the British had absolutely defeated them in terms of the dreadnought race by 1911.
Sure, but like, again, that's not my argument. My argument is not related to what happens in the past. We're talking about potential threats, and if
Mhm.
I'm considering a Germany which controls Poland, the Baltics, plus the Soviet Union,
Not a
in
lot
19
of not a lot of coastline in any of that, mate.
it's not negligible. Put it that way.
Well, it's
And-
negligible, really, because it's all in the Baltic and none of it can get out because Britain's kind of a plug in front of the Baltic.
Well, okay,
Like
well,
as a naval historian, that's what Britain is. It's kind of a plug in front of the Baltic. Like the Germans or the Russians or anyone else can have an enormous naval force in the Baltic, but getting out of the Baltic, past the North Sea and into the Atlantic, is very, very difficult.
okay,
It's a bit like even the Russians, and the Russians at the moment are easily winning the war in the Ukraine, but their Black Sea fleet can't really get out of the Black Sea because of the bloody Turks. And I mean, if it came to a real war, Russia's going to beat Turkey like 9.9 times out of 10. But at the moment, because they don't want to get in a war with Turkey, their fleet can't get out. And
Okay.
it's a bit like that with the Baltic. It doesn't matter if all of the Baltic was German. It would not matter. It will not greatly help their warship building because most of those countries don't have the facilities to build capital ships. They can't build battleships or aircraft carriers.
Again, this is a short-term thing. This is a short-term mindset. Like,
Only, well, short term over what?
Like
10, 15 years?
if you can build up these things, and so like the first thing we know is that in per capita terms, Britain was declining, and you know that situation still stands in terms of economic production.
Mm-hmm.
Britain's productivity as a proportion of the world, I think, fell down to something like 33%.
But Britain could still
between-
build warships faster than
Dude,
anyone else.
come
except
on, man.
America. No,
Come
stop.
Duke,
No,
Duke,
I'm sorry.
You'll wait.
I'm sorry.
I give you
We
like
could
half
still-
a year to outlay your argument, and
No,
then
hang on. I'm sorry.
come on.
I've got to talk about this because it's true. Britain could still build warships faster than anyone else except America, even in 1942.
Am I allowed to like make my
No,
case
that was
about-
all I was trying to say. I
Okay,
just
so
wanted to
in
get
terms
that.
of trends, Britain's productivity is declining.
trends.
Okay.
Trends.
You know, and now you have the threat of more than half the continent. I don't care like if like in the immediate term they can't produce anything worth a damn. It's about the longer term, and you've got these countries which control what, a sixth of the world's GDP, and that's dead set aligned against Britain. Yeah, damn
So
straight,
you-
I'd be worried about it.
How long are you talking about in this term? This timeline, mate?
20, 30 years, 40 years, maybe.
Okay, so if we're in 1940, you're talking about 1985. Is that
Well,
right?
foreign policy is the art of identifying long-term trends. A lot of people are worried about the decline of the United States into the foreseeable future and the rise of China. I don't have a personal opinion on that.
But but none of us, as far as I know, are talking about 35 years. We're talking 10 years, maybe 15 at the outside.
Well, here's the thing: like big, in terms of big geopolitical changes, normally those do last a long time. For instance, the German unification of 1871 has had geopolitical impacts that didn't last 10 years. They've lasted to today. Imperial overstretch. I mean, if that brings the Germans under imperial overstretch, then, Britain occupying an empire which is something like, 10 times its own population? Something like that. I don't think.
I have nothing to say about imperial overstretch. It wasn't true. Because I don't believe in it, I think it was crap. But,
it doesn't seem to be. There doesn't seem to be evidence, but gonna save that George quote for future reference. But like my personal take is that, like, if I am a person in British government and I'm basically seeing one continental power threatening to take over half of the richest continent in the world.
You're now going to give me a Churchill fucking ideology.
I don't.
Carry on.
Call it Churchill, I suppose. Of course, I'm going to say, actually, this might be a threat to us.
Nah.
Maybe we should deal with it.
I did 15, 10, 12 years ago, I might have agreed with you, but having read much more about this stuff, Hitler had no intention of attacking Britain. He really didn't want to attack anyone in the West. Like, his deal was make Lebensraum in the East. And you know what? I would have, not given the Germans or the Russians, the communists under Stalin, so much as a second-hand pair of British Army boots. And I would have been very happy to see the last SS Panzergrenadier fly against the last NKVD guy somewhere around Archangel. That would have been great as far as I was concerned. And I would have just cheered it on.
Do you not see any problem at all, hypothetically speaking, if Germany did take all of that area of Russia? Like, suppose that they did have atrocious...
No, I don't. No, I don't. It would have been the same problem as we faced with Stalin, both pre and even more post World War II. It would have been the same problem.
I don't know. I think...
Why would Hitler have running all that shit have been somehow worse than Stalin running all that shit? I never worked this out myself, except unless you were Jewish, in which case maybe it would have been, but I'm not, so I don't care.
If you were Jewish, if you were Slavic, if you were...
If you
were gay, you were Romani, you were in any way...
Don't care. I'm not gay. I'm not gay either. I don't care about any of that.
If you were...
I'm not part of you. Some of what you're saying here, George, is like the liberal agenda.
I don't care what you call it. I believe...
No, but I don't support any of it. Like, I don't care if Hitler was any gay. I don't really like the fact that he killed Jewish women and children, or gypsy women and children, or any other women and children, really. But that's not the same thing. I don't care.
You just don't...
I'm looking at this from a British point of view, and like, if Hitler was like didn't like any of the gay American Empire stuff that we are supposed to support today, you know what? good on him in many respects. And in the respects where not good on him, I don't care so long as the Royal Navy's strong enough to beat him if he ever comes out. That's all I would care about. Nothing else.
Right, we're just gonna have to agree to disagree on that. If there's
Well,
something,
I'm not a liberal. All right, I'm not a
call
liberal.
it what you want. You can call it what you want, but like at the end of the day,
If you are in favor of gay people, you're a liberal, and I'm not.
I'm for innocent people not getting murdered.
Me
How about
too.
that?
Me too. Me too. I'm absolutely the same as that.
What?
But I don't give them. I do not give them special rules. None of them.
I'm not giving any of them special roles. I'm just saying, look,
Rules. I said.
yeah, a country that is near to us, which we can do something about, is murdering millions of people.
Don't care. Don't care. Don't care. Don't care.
Yeah, I think that's. I'm not gonna lie. I really struggle with that sort of point of view.
Well, there you go. Nor my business. Don't care. So long as the Royal Navy remains the biggest navy in the world, I do not care. Not even slightly do I care.
Yeah, I really struggle with that.
Well, there you
anyway,
go. I'm not. Jules Roy says he's iron drunk. Jules Roy, you're a Frenchman, and trust me, I'm not even drunk enough.
How do you know he's French?
Because he's told me many times. But anyway,
Duke,
and I'm
you
actually
are
not.
drunk.
I'm actually not drunk. I wish I was.
You are a
but I'm
white
not.
sudden roast beef.
No, I'm not even drunk. I wish I was. Anyway, this is supposed to be a stream about the British Army. So let us move on to the British Army in 1944 that goes over to France on the 6th of June 1944. And we, along with their Canadian friends and allies, ends up fighting more than 3/4 of the German panzer divisions. Whereas almost no German armor was fighting the Americans. Let's move on to that.
Yeah. So, okay.
Why did that happen for a start? Well, it happened because Rommel, who was the German commander in the West, decided that the British and Canadian forces were the much bigger threat than the Americans, because Rommel had fought the Americans in North Africa, and the German Africa Corps had beaten the Americans fairly convincingly in a couple of battles, which you will only partly get if you watch Patton the film. So there we go.
Well, as I understand it, the Americans in 1942 were basically so eager to get their pants wet that they threw a bunch of greenies against the seasoned Africa Corps, and they got
They did, yeah.
To them.
Yes, they did.
Which would just happen to just about anyone. You know, the German Wehrmacht at that point had been combat bloodied for, depending on how you count it, anywhere between 3 and 6 years. So it's completely bonkers. Yeah, but
yeah, absolutely true. But of course, Patton was the hero of World War II.
It's so weird that I don't get the Patton worship. It's a bit like Rommel. I don't get the worship of these guys.
I don't get the worship for either of them, but I mean, you know, I don't get the worship for Montgomery by the Brits either. They were all very flawed men.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of best generals of the war, you're almost always looking elsewhere apart from, like always the first people guys that people put up, like Zhukov, Guderian, Rommel, things like that. These are normally people like, for example, Zhukov, like, you know, had the Rzhev meat grinder, which he like threw 400,000 men into basically a bottomless pit. So
the best British generals of World War II were Auchinleck is very underrated. However, the best British generals of World War II were Bill Slim in the Far East, who was absolutely military. I don't know if he was a military genius, but he was great. And as Atman has just said in the chat, O'Connell in 1940, who was fabulous. And his offensive was destroyed by Churchill, who decided to remove most of his best troops and send them to Greece, where they had no chance whatsoever of winning.
Well, yeah, this is actually one of the things that I found quite interesting about the topic, because, you know, a lot of the British Army drama actually happened in the mid-wars in North Africa, in which Churchill threw a hissy fit about just about every general who was trying to do things doing things as he did.
You're not winning quickly enough, even though I'm giving you no troops.
That's the essence of it.
Yeah.
And of course, so he gets Montgomery, and what does Montgomery do? He sits on his ass for 6 months or something like that. And Churchill said, "Yeah, I love this guy."
Yeah, Montgomery just turned around and said, "No, I'm not attacking. No, I'm not attacking. No, I'm not attacking." Until he got more and more and more and more forces, and eventually Churchill said, "All right." No. But yeah, no, as Atman quite rightly says in the chat, I think O'Connor was probably the best British general of the whole war, and the second best British general was General Bill Slim in Burma. All the rest of the British generals in World War II were pretty crap, to be honest. I mean, I'm all right. You were right a bit. Auchinleck's not terrible, but I mean, Auchinleck won the defensive Battle of Alamein, for example, which he is never granted these days.
No.
But Montgomery, I have no time for him at all, to be honest.
Well, yeah, I found this quite a lot when I've read lots of books, because it seems like historians really like to sort of pick a general they really like, and they sort of trumpet them around, and it's normally the stars of the war seems to be not the guys on top, like Patton. I don't really see it about. I don't see much in Montgomery at all. In fact, he's arguably a pretty bad general. Zhukov, I don't think was pretty good. Manstein, all these guys, and you get these unsung stars.
Manstein was a god if you're one of the weeaboos.
Yeah. Those who believe in the Manstein shall receive the blessings of the Manstein, as Tick said.
Yeah.
Like normally the unsung stars of the war are people like Auchinleck, Harold Alexander. I know less about O'Connor, but
O'Connor was a genius. He with 32,000 British, Australian, and Indian troops destroyed. He destroyed 250,000 Italians with 32,000 men, and not many casualties really. Like he didn't lose many men. O'Connor was like a genius, but then Churchill came along and said, "No, we're going to send 2 Commonwealth divisions, the Australian and New Zealand division, and a British armoured brigade to Greece, because let me think now. I'm trying to think, how many men was that? Somehow or another, like 30,000 British guys were going to beat 250,000 Germans." And everyone said to him, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it." But he still did, because he was a wank. And Churchill was a wank. I'm not a fan of Churchill at all. But I don't like Churchill for a different reason from many other people. The focus was mostly Jewish. There were all sorts of other bad things going on with Churchill. But I hate Churchill because he didn't support the last chance to make the British Empire real when he walked across the floor from the Conservatives to the Liberals over imperial tariff preference. When he got loads of Royal Navy sailors killed in World War One because he was a wank, and Churchill was a wank about Royal Navy sailors. Knew nothing about naval tactics at all. I hate him because he did get involved with the Focus, which was a Jewish group. It has to be said, it really was. And like, we need to stop lying about that because it was. And they paid all these bills, but then Churchill had been living off like American crappy newspapers and magazines, paying him money for years in the 1920s and 30s because he always lived beyond his means. But then when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, he stopped the Singapore Royal Navy base from being properly fortified. Churchill was a shitbag. I'm sorry. He was a shitbag. There's a reason he liked pigs, and it wasn't because he was a good guy.
I'm pleased to hear that the Shakespearean monologue has been recited once again. But yeah.
I don't think I did Shakespeare.
It's just you talk you. I can't remember the last stream in which you said you didn't like, in which you did talk about Churchill.
Oh, listen, I'm waiting to do a stream with, hopefully, I'm waiting to do a stream with a chap on Churchill. He likes Churchill even less than me, but to look at him from a military and naval perspective, he was a very bad man.
Mm-hmm.
And without him, I'm not sure, in late 1942, an American cruiser would have arrived at Cape Town to get the very last British gold reserves and take them to the US. And that's the thing I want everyone to know about Churchill.
So, British Army.
Yeah. In 44, it was pretty good. It was pretty good in 44, to be honest.
Yeah, well, we finally had time to prepare, I suppose. But as I understand,
allowing for the 7th Armored Division, I think it was the 7th Armored Division, who had fought from 1939 all the way through, and Britain decided, yeah, okay, you're going across on D-Day, boys. And these guys had fought literally for 6 years. And constantly, whenever you look at the reports, these blokes were a bit shy, didn't want to get killed, held back a bit. Do you know what? If I'd have fought for 6 years, so would I have done that. It was cruel to send the 7th Armored Division to fucking D-Day in 1944. Fuck Churchill, fuck the British government, and no, it was cruel. All that division had fought, all of the survivors of that division, which was not all of them by any means, had been fighting since 1940. You scum. How many times are you supposed to risk being burnt to death or having your head blown off? How many times? There has to be a limit. As a soldier, there has to be a limit. And Churchill never understood, there has to be a limit. And also, then you look at Montgomery, and Montgomery was running these big offensives in Normandy, and they were mostly tank armored division offensives. The reason for that was British Army was running out of infantry because we had so many blokes who otherwise would have been in the infantry in things like Bomber Command, etc., as ground crew. Bomber Command did fuck all in World War II, really. Don't get me wrong, the aircrew were the bravest of the brave, but they did nothing to make Britain win the war. Nothing. Bombing German seas to crap didn't win the war. Just didn't. I'm sorry. But the idea that, let's look at what we're going to do. So more British and Canadian troops landed on D-Day than American troops by a considerable amount. The naval forces landing on D-Day were more than 2/3 Royal Navy or Royal Canadian Navy, etc. And more than 2/3 of the air forces were also British.
Yeah, well, as I understand it, the U.S. Navy was so overwhelmingly concerned with Pacific operations. Royal Navy really had to take up the slack in terms of D-Day.
Yeah. Even though the Royal Navy was also sending more and more ships to the Far East.
Yeah. It was a very much an overcommitted fleet, but as I've heard, I'm not sure if this is true, but apparently the bombardment gave quite a racket and was quite successful. So, by the way, just for anyone who's talking, I showed some clips of it on the Discord. One of my favorite movies. It's not incredibly accurate, but I'm not incredibly bothered by it. It's a film called The Longest Day, which is about the Normandy landings, and it covers it from a British, American, and German perspective. It also has the French resistance. It does overplay the French resistance a lot.
All the French were in the resistance once the Allies arrived, and that's what my grandfather told me, who went across on D+3. He said all the French were in the resistance, but only once the Allies had arrived.
Yeah, Mitch, that's it. Longest Day, 1962. Yeah, so well, I mean, even then, regarding the French resistance, I think the idea is that, like, even considering its numbers, its effect was highly overstated.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to diss, the Free French Army or anything like that. I'm just saying that the French resistance in general,
the Free French Army were great as long as you gave them a little job that de Gaulle thought was okay.
Yeah, once you get de Gaulle to play ball once in a while, but in terms of the French resistance, nah. And yeah, I mean, the only real effective resistance just about anywhere during the war you would have seen would have been in Yugoslavia. Apart from that, it was normally potatoes. So
absolutely, and even in Yugoslavia, it was communists. And those communists spent almost as much time killing royalists as they did Nazis.
Yeah. Fussy bunch.
But, we in the West, born in America, support Joseph Stalin, who was one of the biggest assholes in the entire history of the universe. But somehow, Joseph Stalin was cool. Give me a fucking break. He was at least as bad as Hitler. He was at least as bad as Hitler. And up to about 1941, he made Adolf Hitler look like a amateur in terms of mass murder.
Are we going back to this?
I want to because we have to.
I don't think we do, but okay.
Well, okay, you can pretend if you want that Stalin was great, but I'm not going to do it.
It's
not
like
gonna do
you're
it.
putting words in my mouth, Duke.
Well, look, Stalin up until 1941. If you look at Stalin and Hitler was a small-time amateur at mass murder compared with Stalin. Up until 1941 and after Operation Barbarossa. And that's just a fact. It's not a lie. It's a fact.
No one's disagreeing with that fact, Duke. It's more about what Hitler would have done after the war.
Why Stalin?
Because Stalin had no plans to murder, and yes, I'm using that word, murder 120 million people. Hitler did.
120 million people.
Yeah. Hitler planned.
Where's the 120 million people come from?
This was drawn up from high command with the issuing of Führer Directive 21. They planned to, after Russia was defeated, they didn't plan to, intentionally murder. Intentionally is a strong word. They didn't plan to put them in chambers or anything, but they just said, "Yeah, look, we're going to have all these people, and we're just not going to feed them."
Yeah,
I'm going to take control of 120 million people, and I'm just not going to feed them. Fuck, man, that's fucking horrid.
Hang on. So this is a bit like Stalin's Holodomor, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, but okay, but in terms of scales, Holodomor is what, 6 million people? 4 million?
That's what we're told. That's what we're told.
Versus plans for 120 million.
Where do you get that number from?
I think that comes from a book. That comes from a book I read a while back. But Nicholas Stargart, The German War. I actually really enjoyed this book. I read it cover to cover about a year or so ago.
All right. See, this is my problem. If you're going to kill, as Stalin did, 6 million people in Ukraine, and Hitler killed something like I don't know, 4 to 6 million Jewish people, plus a lot of other guys. 120 million is ridiculous, isn't it?
I mean, the fact that it was plans for that alone is what's.
But also, you can't run a foreign policy on that shit. You just can't.
It's less about it's more the intent of doing that, which just fucks with me. It's like, oh my god, like, I mean, you get things like Mao, which the Great Leap Forward, in which he kills 50 million people, but that was that was gross negligence, as opposed to like
absolutely. He didn't make an excuse for Mao. I would.
Come on, man, because he said,
I'm
"Yeah,
sorry,
look,
you're making an excuse for it,
dude." You can describe, dude. You can try and describe arguments, or you can actually engage with them. You can pick your poison.
What I'm saying is, you're a very intelligent man, as I know, and you're making excuses for Mao. 60 million people is more than either Stalin.
You're not engaging with the argument. You're not engaging with the argument.
What? But it's more people dead, murdered, than
You're not engaging with the argument. That is not the argument.
What's the argument?
The argument is that there was an intentional. The Great Leap Forward, was not Mao didn't draw this up and said, "Yeah, 50 million people are going to die."
It's an actual-
That's what happened
It's an
in
actual-
actuality, but that's not what his intention.
And that is somehow an excuse.
Shit,
Is what
that's not an excuse. I never made that an excuse, Duke. You are not engaging with the argument. This is a really exhausting thing about talking to you. So, okay, so.
I know, I'm like really.
But the Nazis had an intentional thing saying, yes, we're going to conquer Russia and we intend to starve 120 million people.
all right.
Different scales, man.
All right.
Different
Now,
scales.
Okay. So a Nazi plan that never happened and was never going to happen is somehow worse than Mao doing a plan that he hadn't thought about.
No.
Is that what you're saying?
No. The difference, we are trying to understand, because you are asking me why I think that Nazism is far less preferable to communism. And I am trying to outlay to you that an ideology that is willingly saying, yes, I'm going to kill these people, and not by accident. I'm going to do this intentionally because I don't like them because their mother is of the wrong ethnicity. I'm going to do that. I find that a grossly detestable thing. And I find that far more
On the
detestable.
other hand, it's more detestable than Chairman Mao killing actually 60 million people because, like, he's a moron, is what you're saying. Is that right?
Just repeat that.
So what you're actually saying is the Germans claiming they're going to do X, Y, or Z is actually worse than Chairman Mao doing what he really did, but just because on the basis Chairman Mao is a moron. Is that what you're saying?
You're getting closer, but not quite. Because the basic idea is that the basic idea is that communism is a shit ideology. Okay, it's fucking negligent.
You don't say.
And it lets a lot of people starve.
Yeah, you don't say.
But the intent to murder people
was not there.
Is on another scale.
Oh, right. So was Stalin's intention to murder Ukrainians in the Holodomor on the same scale or not?
You tell me, is 120 million people equivalent to 6 million?
I think once you get
yes, there's a yes or no answer, Duke.
No, once you get into the millions, the answer doesn't make any sense. Does it? Once you get into the millions. George, I like you, mate. You're my mate. Once you get into the millions, that answer no longer makes any sense. That's my view.
I mean,
like if you said to me, am I going to starve this town next to me, or am I going to starve this whole Australian province, all right, on purpose, you can't do that because it's not a real question. It just isn't.
No. Okay, how about this instead? Okay, you now have a choice instead of saying, okay, I can let a regime take over control of a territory, and it's either regime A, which will be grossly negligent, egregiously negligent, and let 10% of its population starve, or have another regime which is intentionally trying to wipe them out and kill 90% of them. For me, the choice is fucking obvious.
Depends.
No, there is no fucking way you can respond to that with it depends.
No, it depends.
Do you have any value for human life, Duke? Like, come on.
I don't like humans mostly.
Yeah, well,
I don't like most humans. I like all dogs and like some humans. But no, you listen now. Like, I'm a Brit. Everything is what would be good for Britain. That's always what I look for everything from. And that's what always every single British politician should have looked at things from, including that wank Winston Churchill. Sorry, that's my view.
I'm sorry, but there is just something
Britain,
incredibly horrific
Britain
about
is,
that.
but Britain is not the World Health Organization. Britain
No,
is
it
not.
doesn't need to be. It's not
And
about. It's
no,
not about. It's not
shouldn't
about
be.
It's not about being the world police or trying to, put everyone under the same ideology or
But
anything
that's
like
what
that.
you're trying to say.
No. The point is that there is something fucking disgusting going on that we can do something about.
What can Britain do about it except become bankrupt in World War II? Explain to me what we can do except become bankrupt.
Well, I mean, there is umpteenth sort of examples of people who have basically said, well, look, for example, you yourself have said, well, look, Britain could have waited for a slightly later point to go into the war.
Much later point.
Well,
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a matter of verbal quantitatives as opposed to mathematical
All right,
quantitatives.
1943, 44, yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, it's not much later. That's a few years.
But that's a lot later, and it makes a big difference.
Even at my age, that's relatively potato. But
look, no, George. Britain joining the war in 39 gave a Royal Navy that was half ready. Britain joining the war in 43 would have given a Royal Navy that was totally ready.
Sure. Again,
very big difference.
It's not my contention, but you seem to have a problem understanding my contentions. But
I have a problem because, I only look at it from a British point of view, and you seem to have this humanitarian point of view, which I don't understand at all. Not at all.
I don't like people dying, Duke.
Don't care.
People always you don't.
People die every single day, and I don't care.
I mean,
I don't care about people dying, mate. I just don't.
Yeah,
I care about British people dying.
I really struggle with that.
I care about British people dying. I care about Australian people dying. Don't care about most people dying all the time. Don't care at all. I just don't. People die every single day. And if the Germans and the Russians want to kill each other, let them go and do it. I don't care. They can all die. And I wouldn't care if there were not one single Russian or German left at the end of it. I wouldn't care. I would be a bit sad about the women and kids, but I can't do anything about that. I'm a British guy. All I'm doing is trying to look after Britain and the Empire. I'm not the United Nations. I'm not the world police. I'm not the moral police. I don't care. It's like, at the moment we're watching Ukraine being increasingly defeated by the Russians. All right. And most of the Ukrainians are in dire danger of being cut off. Most of the Ukrainians are in dire danger of being cut off and losing because they can't retreat. So they've got the choice of dying or surrendering. I hope that all of those Ukrainians surrender because, the Russians eventually will say, okay, guys, you can get back to Ukraine. Because the Russians aren't being vile bastards about it. But the Ukraine has no chance of winning that war. And, we have pedophile, senile bastard Joe Biden and fat cuck Johnson pretending we can change that. And we can't. And Zelensky and Ukraine, which is the most corrupt nation in Europe, basically a money-changing scheme for Europe. And the sooner they lose, the better. I don't care. But honestly, Britain is not the world police. I never wanted Britain to be the world police, and if it doesn't affect the British, I don't really care what you do. Kill as many of the enemy as you want, because that's always the way it's been. Always, man. Always. Look, to bring this back a little bit to what we're supposed to be talking about, my grandfather went across in D+3 and came home as late as he possibly could in 1946 or even early 47. But and like he got threatened by the French resistance because he closed down a brothel that was ripping off British soldiers. My granddad just turned around and said, "Well, I got my Sten gun, mate," because he wasn't scared of fucking frogs.
Sorry, Duke. I'm just going to need to cut in here. My internet is cutting up really bad. I don't know what the issue is, but I don't think I can really stay on much longer. So,
all right. Well, see how you go. You'll find
appreciate the chat.
You'll find it at the moment. So see how long you can last. Look, like I said, my grandfather went across in D+3. He got threatened by the French resistance because, as a company sergeant major, he closed down a French brothel that was ripping off British troops. And the French resistance said they were going to kill him. He turned around and said, "Well, I got my Sten gun, I don't care." My granddad was never scared of fuck all in his life. But, but here we sit today with this Ukraine war where supposedly it's brave and gallant and good to go and die for gay pride parades, which is the only thing Ukraine stands for. Whereas, in fact, in the Donbass region, the Ukrainians are increasingly likely to get really badly beaten and surrounded and defeated. But not according to the Western media. It's just bullshit, I would not lose one man for Gay Pride Month. Not a single man is worth dying for Gay Pride Month. And that's the only thing that the West is fighting for in Ukraine is Gay Pride Month. Fuck Gay Pride Month. I don't like gay people. I don't want to have anything to do with gay people. Fuck all of them. And when eventually, and I'm sure it's going to happen, Russia wins totally. Good. I don't think Putin for a minute is our guy. But you know what? The people who don't like Putin, like that senile pedophile bastard Biden and that fucking fat cuck Johnson, they're not our people either. And I'd take Putin over either of those two every single time I possibly could. Every single time. But, and you know what? Take this back to the subject. British Army, the British Liberation Army in June 1944, and the Canadian Allies would have been exactly the same. They would not have liked gay guys. They would not have liked trans people. Not at all. And 95% of them, at least, would not have wanted brown and black people in their countries. So, yeah. That's pretty much what I think. Maybe I'm talking bollocks, but I don't think I am. Anyway, there we go. anyone got anything else to say? Because my young friend, by the way, who wanted me to do this, I'm not going to be in my good book in a minute. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So, yeah.
Now the drums beat up again for all true soldiers, gentlemen. Let us list and march, I say, over the hills and far away. Over the hills and o'er the main, with Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. We hand commands and will obey. Over the hills and far away, gentlemen who have a mind to serve a queen both good and kind, list and enter into pay. Then over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, the Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. Command commands and will obey. Over the hills and far away, no more from sound of drum retreat, will Marlborough and Galway beat the French and Spaniards every day. Over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, the Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. Command commands and will obey. Over the hills and far away, 40 shillings on the drum for those who volunteers to come. Shirts and clothes and present pay. Over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, the Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. Command commands and will obey. Over the hills and far away, the apprentice Tom he may refuse to wipe his angry master's shoes, for then he's free to sing and play. Over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, the Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. The hand commands and will obey. Over the hills and far away, we then shall lead more happy lives, by getting rid of brats and wives, sold on both the night and day. Over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, the Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. The hand commands and will obey. Over the hills and far away, or if we go 'tis 1 to 10, when we return all gentlemen as well as they. Went over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, the Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. The hand commands and will obey. Over the hills and far away.
Steve, stream diverged drastically from topic. All right, topic. The British and Canadian Army in June, July, and August 1944 in Normandy did defeat the German panzer divisions, and they were facing far more than 3/4 of the German panzer divisions. The Americans faced very little German armor. It was all concentrated against the British and Canadian Army. And yeah, the British Canadian Army defeated them. Not least because British and Canadian tank regiments had 17-pounder Firefly Shermans, with 17-pounder put into the turret of a Sherman tank. There you go. Go well, guys, and I'll check you soon.